Welcome, everyone. This is a special episode. There's no introduction here, or I'm not selling anything this episode or anything like that, because I want to bring your attention to my guest, who is Adrienne Rockenhaus. And her husband is in jail right now. And the situation, the details surrounding are very dubious and concerning. And this is a issue that should concern a lot of Americans just for that reason alone, but also because this ties into certain things that you, the audience, will also be interested in, running Tor exit nodes and things of this sort. So we will get into the details. But for now, let me bring in the guest. So, Adrienne, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. And I know Conrad really thinks you too. Sorry, the whole sunlighting thing, he's aware that that's the one thing that's like really helping him right now. So, yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us.
Absolutely. So I'm just scrolling through Twitter the other day, and I see some message from you. Maybe somebody had retweeted it, and it says something about somebody get arrested. Maybe there's like a Tor exit node involved. That's kind of a previous point to the story, but I was interested. And anytime I see police abuse situations like this, I'm just like, hey, the least I can do is look into the story and try to amplify it and spread the word. So your husband Conrad is in jail right now. He has some serious situations going on because he has some health problems. But before we get into some of that, maybe you could walk me back here. Just talk a little bit about yourself and your husband, like who you are, where you're coming from, and then we'll get into some of the legal stuff.
Okay. Well, my husband and I actually met. We were both participators, writers for Encyclopedia Dramatica. He actually hosted it back, in 2017, 2018. That's actually how we met. It was actually when he was in prison the first time in Texas, where he started reaching out to people through like the TrueLinks email. And we just started talking a lot, like while he was in prison the first time. And that's actually how our relationship began, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, Conrad, he's a disabled veteran. He was in the Navy. He did run Tor exit nodes and relays. Like you said, he's was a volunteer for the Tor network. We both right now currently, I have a company that does web development and hosting, and he is employed by me. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
You guys are very techy.
Yeah, he is. I'm not nearly as much as he is. I tend to focus more on like content and social media, stuff like that, where he's more of like design, development, programming, stuff like that.
Gotcha. Okay. And so, yeah, running a Tor exit relay node, that's something that we actually have talked about and shown on this show. Obviously, that's an important part of running Tor. So we'll get into that, but let's kind of zoom into the current moment. There's more context, obviously, that we're going to get into here. But for the recent events, okay, take me back to September 4th. There is a raid on your property, and your husband is arrested. Just let's get into maybe the details leading up to that in a moment, but just give me some of the facts about that event to the issues that your husband is facing right now in jail.
Okay, so yes, he is currently in federal prison, and you're right. We'll start with what happened on September 4th last month. On that day, a U.S. Marshals, basically fugitive task force, conducted a military-style raid on my home. The public can see the videos on my website, rockenhaus.com, where they use a breaching tool to smash our windows, physically beat my husband, 100% disabled combat veteran with a traumatic brain injury. They kick him in the head. You can see that in the video. Hours later, he suffered a grand mal seizure in the courtroom as a direct result of that head injury. And I think what's critical for people to understand is the legal justification for this. The only warrant on public record, which anybody can look up in a system called Pacer online, is a simple standard arrest warrant for what are fabricated, nonviolent, supervised release violations. And that's it. It's not a high-risk warrant for a violent fugitive, but just a simple arrest warrant that does not give federal agents the right to conduct a military-style assault.
Right.
It doesn't allow them to smash your windows, threaten gas, hold a private citizen prisoner in their home, which they did to me, or threaten to shoot the family dog, all of which they did, and it's all on video. It wasn't an arrest. It was a punitive expedition designed to terrorize. To make it even more outrageous, and I think a lot of people don't understand this, is that the home they raided wasn't my husband's legal residence. I had actually moved here just weeks earlier to escape the trauma from because we were raided once earlier in May, to escape the trauma from that, because they held us up with guns, they surrounded us, they threatened dogs that day as well. And, I was being harassed by these probation officers, and I'm a private citizen, no criminal record. They have no jurisdiction over me. So I just wanted to get the fuck out. So my husband's legal residence was still in the Ann Arbor home. I have all the documentation to prove that. And the night before the raid, he was merely just an overnight guest here. And they knew this because my neighbor is willing to testify that she saw federal agents stalking me and my home for days before they struck. So that's kind of crazy that this wasn't even Conrad's home. Like, they had days to raid him at his home in Ann Arbor. They didn't do that. They waited and did it here when he spent the night.
Right. And then the current situation, your husband, as you said, is a veteran. He has a traumatic brain injury. This was obviously exacerbated by people beating you and taking you away to jail. What is his current situation in, because he has some serious medical problems right now in jail. Is that correct?
He does. He never really got any treatment for the head injury. They did take him to a hospital very briefly after the courtroom seizure. When I talked to the hospital, he was there for about an hour, and the hospital said they released him. They didn't want to release him, but they did on the marshal's insistence. And then Conrad was taken to the Livingston County Jail, brought in unconscious, and has still not received any treatment for his head injury. In fact, when he was moved from Livingston County to the prison in Milan, Michigan, they actually reduced his seizure medication, took away some of his other, life-sustaining medications, tried to give him a quadruple dose of metformin, which could possibly kill a person. It's a diabetes medication. And so no, it's not a good situation right now in the prison, medically. And that's medically and, just the safety of everything too.
Right. And there's a little, obviously, we've hinted at a little bit of a history here, but nothing justifies the way that this was done. And so is he being abused by the the guards in prison right now? Did you say?
There are a couple of guards that he actually identified to me over email, that have visible white supremacist tattoos. One was like, the way he described it was like this. I looked him up, and one was like the Reichslander. It was like the eagle, and the other was the sun wheel. But it's like, the KKK uses them. It's like unmistakable. Basically, yeah, they kind of put like a kill tag on him by telling everybody that he was a child molester. And so, I've had to send his paper, his paperwork, his docket and all that, so that he could show people, no, that's not why I'm here. But yeah, I mean, he was assaulted in the computer lab. He's not in a safe situation.
And his legal representation in this last month or so has also let him down. Could you explain that real quick?
Yeah, that's actually at the heart of this. He had no legal representation. His own paid attorney, his name was Mark Lakin, had actually betrayed him months earlier after the first raid in May. Lakin coerced my husband into pleading guilty to the first fraudulent violation, even though I had given Lakin over the phone just tons of proof of his innocence. And 30 seconds before the hearing starts, Lakin separates my husband from me, tells him if he doesn't plead guilty to the violations, he will go to jail. My husband, with his traumatic brain injury, gets twisted up, can't make a quick decision, doesn't get to talk to me, pleads guilty to the charges he's not guilty of. I wanted to scream in court. I wanted to just start screaming. And it's funny because the judge and Mark Lakin actually noted their friendship in court, which was pretty interesting. So we fired him in August, but he refused. Lakin refused to file a motion to withdraw from the case for months even. And this is where the judge, Stephen Murphy, who noted his friendship with Lakin in court, created what we called this procedural trap, where my husband was forced to file his own handwritten pleas. Well, they weren't handwritten, but hand typed pleas with the court begging for a new lawyer. This was before he was arrested in September. But Judge Murphy struck my husband's pleas from the record and cited a rule against hybrid representation. And he basically said, you can't even file these motions because you already have a retained attorney, the same retained attorney he's trying to file or fire. So we were completely trapped. We couldn't get a new lawyer because the old lawyer wouldn't quit. Couldn't ask the judge for help because he refused to hear us. It was like a perfect Sixth Amendment crisis, leaving a disabled veteran now to rot in jail with no legal voice. So our only weapon has just been this public pressure. We published all the evidence of Lakin's misconduct. And finally, on October 2nd, I think was Thursday, he finally surrendered after like 2 months and filed his motion to withdraw.
Understood. And so we're going to go a little bit into the backstory now. But before that, if people are listening and they say, this is, how can I help? I don't think you're raising funds, is my understanding, but you're trying to bring public attention. Is there more though? If people have, legal experience, as you say, you're based in Michigan. I don't know if it's a, state or federal sort of thing, but
it's federal. Yeah.
Federal. Okay. So is there anybody who could be of service who's listening right now? Whatever their occupation is.
Civil rights attorneys that handle federal cases for sure. He did finally get appointed this public defender for his criminal case, but we also have filed what are called Bivens suits against the federal officers, stating that they violated our constitutional rights, and against one marshal. And so, we filed those motions pro se actually like a couple of days before the September 4th raid. And which is interesting. And so yeah, we could use some help on that. I had filed a writ of habeas corpus to document the unconstitutional things that were happening to Conrad right now while he's in jail and why he should be released. And that's just, the docket is silent on that. So what we could really use is somebody in the civil arena who handles federal cases. That would be just a tremendous help.
No doubt. Yeah. So if somebody's listening who is of that variety or who knows somebody, definitely spread the word. And that's another thing. People just help spread the word about this. Okay. So Adrienne, just take me back to this September raid real quick. One of the important things is that you had cameras going, and we'll have links to all the video footage. And once people listen to that, I think they'll pretty clearly, regardless of anything else, be on your side. A video is worth a million words. Did you say that they tried to disconnect these cameras? And otherwise, how important was it to have these cameras set up? Like just, moving forward, perhaps, or other people who are in situations of police abuse, how important are cameras and what's the ideal kind of camera strategy there?
Well, they did try to disconnect them, but they were on a battery backup and they were streaming to a cloud system. They did disconnect them. In fact, I had just posted on our website the video of the first raid where they surrounded us, threatened canines. And I think that's why they knew to try to disconnect them, because they didn't want to get, put on YouTube again. But yeah, they didn't realize there was like a whole battery backup system. So yeah, I don't think they thought they were being recorded at all. They were probably pretty surprised to see it.
Right. Whereas if it was just being backed up locally, potentially, and it wasn't being uploaded to the cloud, potentially they would have successfully shut these down? Or
I think it still records to the I want to say it's called an NDR. The hardware isn't my specialty, but yeah, I think it would have still recorded to the hard disk.
Right. Okay. So they're pulling out the power cables, but it has a battery backup, right?
Exactly.
They're not fiddling or removing the storage devices or
right. They just pulled out the wires.
Gotcha. Okay. But
to unplug them.
The cameras were huge, though. Is that something like moving forward? Big fan of cameras on your property, I'm guessing, moving forward?
Yeah, especially now. We had that Ring doorbell camera that caught the first raid, which it caught after that. I would recommend it for anybody who's, just for your safety. But also, without that, I don't think anybody would even be paying attention to this. Even people who are saying my husband's guilty or whatever, there aren't really too many people arguing that what they see on the videos is wrong and feels illegal.
Yeah, so +1 for the category of having cameras on your property. It has its downsides for privacy, but you can do it in a privacy preserving way. And in this case, it absolutely helped you 100%. What is your situation right now? Do you feel like you're in danger, going to be retaliated against? You mentioned that your bank accounts got shut down. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, most of the people that heard about this heard from the Reddit post that I posted a couple of weeks ago. Um, about 2 days after that Reddit post went up, my bank account didn't get seized. It was a joint bank account that I had with Conrad where his disability checks were being deposited and his VA pension. I went to pay a bill and it declined, and I'm like, "Well, that doesn't make sense. I have money in there." So I see that I don't have a bank account. Like, it's like I'm logging in and there's no bank account there. It wasn't seized, it was literally deleted. So I'm like, "Okay, my money is, what is going on?" This is like late at night when I noticed this. And so I call, the fraud department, whatever. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And they literally tell me, "We can't even talk to you. This is something to do with your husband, and he's going to have to be the one to call and find out." And I'm like, "Am I going to get my money back?" Which they did end up sending a check, but it was in Conrad's name only. So I'm not, you know what I'm saying? I can't, I think they're just waiting for me to sign a check that's not mine, and I'm not going to do that. But yeah, I mean, what I think happened was we were banking with SoFi, which is like a newer bank, like an online bank, and they have in their terms of service that they can just shut your account down for any reason. They don't even have to tell you why.
Right.
What I
Right.
think probably happened was probably somebody called, "We're from the federal government. This person is in prison for this reason." And to eliminate any risk, they probably just shut down the account. That's my assessment.
Right. The at the time that you most need funds is when they shut these things down. It's pretty disgusting. So, okay, so that's kind of the current situation now. You're not claiming at all that nothing, no wrongdoing ever happened in this period of time. So let's kind of go back to maybe what triggered some of this. Back to 2018, Conrad is running a Tor exit relay, which means that you're participating in the Tor network, but all of the, obviously Tor great privacy service, great privacy technology, which is used for all sorts of things, as all tools are, right? There's nefarious people using it too. So as the exit person, you're basically the one who is saying, hey, all the people visiting all these websites, that's going to be on my record, essentially, right? As the Tor exit person. So what happened with him running the Tor exit relay? And was that kind of what kicked a lot of this off back in 2018?
Yeah, and I think your audience is pretty familiar that Tor, the onion router, it's a vital tool for anonymity online. So yeah, it's where the encrypted traffic, the exit node, it's the final gateway, like you said, in that network where the encrypted traffic emerges onto the public internet. So it's a critical service for the privacy community. So what you're saying, yeah, his refusal to compromise his Tor node was the start of it all. Um,
Yeah, what happened so he's running the exit relay, and the authorities, do they just say, "Hey, we've there's somebody doing something naughty on Tor, and we want to investigate you as the Tor exit relay." Is that kind of, because that is how it tends to happen when you're running a Tor exit relay, or it can happen in that way. That's why a lot of libraries and big public organizations are the ones who do the Tor exit relay, because they have the kind of the infrastructure to deal with this. But was it kind of just generic like that? That, hey, we found some people doing naughty stuff on Tor and we don't understand Tor, so we're going to hold you responsible?
yeah, well, yeah, okay. So in 2018, and this is actually the document I sent you, and you feel free to post this. I haven't posted it anywhere yet. I just found it recently. Um, in 2018, the federal agents in Colorado wanted to access the data flowing through his node. And that court order from, I think it's Arapahoe County, Colorado, demanded that my husband, Conrad, under his business name at the time, Gray Pony Consultants, turn over records from his privacy protecting Tor exit nodes. Like they had, the IP and you can see on the letter they wanted all the information coming out of it, like any usernames, email addresses, any identifying information. So he refused. He didn't want to betray the trust of the countless people who rely on his nodes for their safety and anonymity. And so, yeah, that's where it began. That is the government's answer to that single principled act of defiance, basically. This is actually really weird, too. And I think I might have shown you this. After my husband was jailed this September, I wrote to a private mailing list for tour relay operators that Conrad used to be a part of, hoping to find support. And the one significant reply I got was from a man named George Hartley, who actually has a multi-year history on that list. I checked and of participating on that list. And in his email, he identified himself as an FBI agent at the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. as part of the Tor community. Well, and then what's funny is how I found that 2008 order. It's on the Wayback Machine from his old blog. My husband's first reaction to this demand from the government back in 2018 was not fear or compliance or anything. He actually took their court order, posted it on his blog, and publicly mocked it. And, I'll be honest, once he was finally out of Texas jail, I asked him to take that down. I thought maybe openly ridiculing the agents who are persecuting you wasn't the best strategy for staying out of trouble. But there's a bit of a divine irony to that, I guess, where, their government's years of relentless persecution have kind of proven him right on that. The post that I actually asked him to delete that was preserved in Wayback Machine is now kind of become the genesis stroll of the whole thing. Where he was openly mocking corrupt federal agents, maybe was the right idea. I don't know.
Right. Walk me through the situation with Tor to the point where he did spend some time in jail in 2020 for like 2 or 3 years. What's the transition there?
Okay, so in 2019, this was actually shortly after my husband had been in a car accident, had some surgery, was on a significant amount of painkillers. They brought up this old pretextual charge where in 2014, and this he pled guilty to this. In 2014, he took down his ex-employer's network for one day after they had fired their whole DevOps team and replaced them with cheap foreign labor. Now, I'm not trying to dismiss the seriousness of that crime. It's a Computer Fraud and Abuse Act crime, intentional damage to a protected computer, which can carry significant time. Actually, CFA charges are usually 10 years, And, I'm not trying to dismiss that, but it wasn't a crime to them in 2014, 2015, 16, 17, 18, until a couple of months before the statute of limitations was up. They come to him while he's on painkillers and he confesses because he's under the influence. So he's on bond for that. And basically, he was put on pretrial detention for 3 years based on a lie from a Texas probation officer. When they had the court hearing to revoke his bond, she swears under oath that on his monitored device, he installed a Linux operating system. But what he actually installed was what's called a SPICE graphics driver. He was taking a PhD program in computer science, and they had told him he could install what he needs for his PhD program on the computer, which I guess this was part of it. So it's kind of like confusing a car radio antenna with its engine. I mean, it's a technically illiterate lie, but it did cost him 3 years of his life.
Right. A lot of these government types are just completely ignorant about how the technology works. And for example, what you're talking about, taking down, I don't know if it's alleged or whatever, but taking down the place that he previously worked at, I mean, sure, is that something that should be illegal? We can talk about that. But compared to, I'm looking on the anti-work Reddit right now, all these strategies that these people have for basically sabotaging the companies that they work for, right? Like if we just talk about proportion, it's really small in the grand scheme of things if we just treat this with some proportion. But these people don't understand how technology works. So they oh, this is crazy. Ross Ulbricht, we're going to be 2 life sentences. It really bloats beyond what it should be.
Yeah, it does. And it was it's really flimsy, the whole Linux operating system. And then the other thing, the transcript for this is actually on my website. You can read the whole thing. The other thing that they said was they scoured his search history and they found the most out of context inflammatory thing they could find to smear him in front of the judge. And in this hearing, they brought up a Google search that Conrad had made for NAMBLA. Is that a term you're familiar with from the South Park episode?
Yeah, you want to give that some context real quick?
Yeah, let me give you some context. Many years ago, South Park did an episode called NAMBLA, which they made fun of. They basically mercilessly mocked NAMBLA, which is the North American Man Boy Love Association. And in this episode, they just make fun of them entirely. It's hilarious. And I think the NAMBLA organization, which did exist at that time, shut down like right after that because nobody knew who they were. But then South Park brought it to light, made fun of them. And then, it was actually a pretty funny episode. So my husband, who was writing and hosting for Encyclopedia Dramatica at the time, Googled it because he wanted to write a satirical article about NAMBLA to make fun of it, inspired by this South Park episode. So this is kind of where you can see like the profound lack of a sense of humor and the complete ignorance of internet culture. Because, Encyclopedia Dramatica, if you're not aware of it, used to be a well-known, like deeply satirical online wiki that spared nobody. I mean, nobody was safe. It makes a lot of jokes, and something like NAMBLA would be a perfect article for that because it's just, makes a mockery of like the whole topic. So because he searched that was one of the other pretextual reasons that they held him pretrial for 3 years.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you can't go on even Twitter these days. I can't scroll down my Twitter feed and see things that aren't worse than that. So
Right.
Internet culture, it's about trolling, it's about irreverence, and the fact that these government types don't understand that shows that they don't have a sense of humor, like they literally don't, and that they're grasping for straws, and they simply just don't understand how this stuff works.
Yeah, and there actually is an FBI expert in that had to admit in that transcript that it was just an open web search. They found nothing illegal, nothing on the dark web, no evidence that he had actually downloaded anything Tor related, nothing like that. Just basically a writer researching a topic and this lie about, the Linux operating system. So this was the reason that they held him for that long.
Right. So he spends time in jail over the course of 3 years for this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They kind of just kind of transfer him from county jail to county jail. I mean, you can see it on his on the Marshall report. I mean, he just was transfer for 3 years. I don't know if that was like to kind of eliminate the whole, you have a right to speedy trial. I don't know why they did it that way, but yeah, I mean, it was a very horrible, grueling situation in Texas, where, by the end of it, he just wanted to plead guilty and go home.
Mm-hmm. So after his time in jail, he is now, it's not probation because probation has different requirements, but correct me with the terminology, but basically he has been, what's the word I'm looking for? Not probation,
supervised release.
Supervised release. That's what he's been under during this time. And is that at all what made these people sensitive in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I'll explain the difference between probation and supervised release too. Probation is generally what you do instead of jail time. And then you have parole, which is people that get out early.
Right. And probation, like you don't have any rights, but that's not what he was.
No, it's not. It wasn't nearly as strict as probation. Supervised release basically just means that you did your time. This is just something they're tacking on at the end. And, part of it is like your devices get monitored and you have to report to your probation officer every now and then. He was supposed to be on this for 3 years. And the first couple of years were actually fine. He had a PO that, there were no problems, perfectly compliant. Her name was Lamisha Rice. She was very professional, very reasonable. And this, tell me if I'm getting off on a left turn a little bit, but my husband is actually 100% medically disabled, certified by both Social Security and the Department of Veteran Affairs. So he's ruled unfit for work from the government due to his combat-related traumatic brain injury. But then, on the other hand, in his supervised release conditions, the federal government, through the court, has ordered that he must work full-time as a condition of his freedom on the supervised release. So it's a catch-22. So to solve this impossible problem, I formally hired him from my own LLC, my own company, which is the software development company. And he is a brilliant developer. He could work from home on a flexible schedule that accommodated his disabilities, and this actually was working. And his first probation officer was professional about it. She reviewed our entire agreement. We signed a third-party risk agreement, which is on my website, from August of 2023, where she officially sanctioned my company as his employer and authorized his use of company work devices, which weren't to be monitored. So for 2 years under her supervision, everything was stable, compliant, successful. There were zero issues. So that's kind of what proves the malice of what came next. Is the stability ended the day that this new probation officer, Stylianos Agapu is his name, took over the case and immediately began attacking the very arrangement that his own office had already approved.
Right. So, okay, just to bring people up on the timeline, in 2018, 19, around there, he's running the Tor exit relay. People take issue with that. He spends time 2020 to 2023 in prison, and then he's released on this supervised release. And there are certain restrictions about what he can and can't do. I think, like you say, he can't, in your website, he's not allowed to use Tor. There's certain
Correct.
other restrictions. He has to be employed during this time, but you've already checked those boxes. So then we get up to around 2024, where this new probation officer comes in. Maybe fill us in on from that point in time up to where we started this episode, where the arrest happens.
Okay, so yeah, the situation here in Michigan became like really hostile after Officer Agapu took on his case. Um, he showed up to our house and he said that he was the probation office's computer forensic expert, which was weird to me at the time. And I'm like, okay, maybe they have that. But it actually reached a breaking point for me in about November of 2024. I had just gotten out of the hospital. I had had a head injury. I was confused. I was like medically vulnerable. I was trying to recover. I was at my aunt's, and Agapu just like calls me, right? And he wasn't calling about my husband. He was calling to threaten me, a private citizen, threatening to raid my home and seize my personal property and my business property. And I was like, hey, can you slow down? I just fell and hit my head. I just, can you slow down and stop yelling at me? And his response was just to get louder and more aggressive. I felt like it was just like this deliberate psychological assault on someone he knew was like already in a medically fragile state. I had just gotten out of the hospital. Then, after a couple months of this, I finally filed a formal detailed 10-point complaint about him, which is also on my website, sent it to his supervisors, to the federal court. The judge was supposed to see it. I don't know if he did. And in that complaint, which is now public, I documented everything. I documented his illegal seizure of my authorized work phone, which contained, sensitive protected data. I documented him having harassed my business clients, which this has hurt my business tremendously, because once clients find out that the feds are involved with you, they don't really want to do business with you anymore. I documented him telling my husband that he needed to control me better. I documented the threats he made while I had the head injury, and his explicit statement that he did tell me that he intended to violate my husband, inserting that his word would be given more weight by the judge because, as he put it, I am married to a felon hacker. So I laid out this complete case of harassment, intimidation, and deliberate attempt to manufacture probation where none existed. So after I filed this complaint, it was like an immediate declaration of war. Just 7 days after I made the complaint, the chief of the office, his name is Dion Thomas, started leaving intimidating voicemails from my ex-husband, who I'd been divorced from over a decade, and just left. That message is actually on my website too. Left a message for my ex-husband asking about me, used my former name. It was, just to be intimidating. And then a few weeks after that, they manufactured this absconder lie to justify the first raid. And when they knew that my husband was actually in the hospital, having like kind of a acute mental health crisis, actually as a result of all this, and they were trying to say that I wasn't updating them, where I have text messages showing that I was updating them. I mean, everything they say about trying to contact him, not being able to get a hold of me, not being able to go get a hold of his family. I mean, we have phone records to refute that.
So you file this complaint, and then they raid you for the first time. This was in May of 2025. This is a few
Yes.
months before we're talking now, the second raid. And you show the video as well. Is this the one where you pull into your driveway and then they pull in right behind you and point guns at you? Is that?
We were actually about to pull out. We were just like going down the street to the store and they just surround us.
And you see the videos, like two totally defenseless people, like clearly exaggerated. Walk us through that May raid, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that was great. I thought we had gotten swatted. I didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden, we're leaving and I know my husband had just spoken to one of the officers like a couple days prior to that. So it just didn't even occur to me, because he had just gotten out of the hospital and everything. It didn't even occur to me like this could be the reason why. I'm just like, did somebody swat us? Like, what's happening? And, they're surrounding us. They're coming at us with guns, threatening to sick the dogs on us. And all of a sudden, they just start arresting Conrad, saying that he violated his supervised release. And you can hear me protesting, like he just talked to his probation officer. There was like some confusion about, who the probation officer was and all that. And it was just very strange. Like it just seemed like overkill for what they were saying. And also, if you're absconding, how are they going to find you at your house?
Exactly. That's they clearly knew exactly where the guy was. It's not like he's trying to hide anywhere or
No.
anything. There's a lot of hypocrisy to this. Okay, so and then what happened between May of this year and September? Did things die down? What happened?
Well, okay, so they had the he got actually released on bond the next day. And then a couple of days later there was a hearing where he got coerced to pleading guilty. And it seemed like everything was going to be okay. Like he was actually due to be done with his supervised release. I think it's tomorrow actually is the day he was supposed to be done with it. And
Jeez.
yeah, so this is like right at the last minute. And we thought it was going to be okay because they kind of said, we'll, as long as everything goes okay until the end, we'll just, leave it at that. So, but then basically, I was in Denver visiting a friend, and this was near the end of August. I've been kind of like in this state of just vigilance and high alert and almost like trauma since the May 5th raid. And I was keeping a very close eye on all of my business devices via Find My. If you use Apple products, that Find My is where you can kind of like keep a GPS location and see where all your devices are and whatnot. So this was in August, and the two probation officers made an unannounced visit to our house when I was in Denver, and they illegally seized my business property again, which they were being used for software development. It was a iPhone and an Apple Watch. And since I noticed it and was monitoring my devices using the Find My feature, when I saw my stolen property was at the probation office, I just immediately remotely erased them, as like I think any business owner would, which sent them into a panic. My husband was actually sitting in the probation office directly in front of them as the phone began erasing itself. And they literally, like, I guess their eyes just got real wide. They look at him and start like accusing him of like ridiculous things. Like I said, whistling codes into the fax machine on Twitter. I don't think it was exactly that, but they're just like, we have a problem. How did you do that? How did you erase it? You're sitting right there. They start patting him down, thinking he just somehow just is such a, good hacker, that he can just do it with his mind. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, this is the level of technical expertise behind this federal investigation. So then I get a call from Stylianos Agapu. Did you erase this iPhone? And I said, yes, I did. I explained it very simply. I saw that it wasn't where it was supposed to be. I marked it stolen and I erased it. Well, one of the claims on this new warrant that the September 4th raid was based on was that they said that Conrad used OnStar to call me to erase the phone, which that didn't happen. And I called OnStar and I said, is there any way I could prove this? And they said, yeah, just have the court send your VIN number and your phone number and we can show that there's like no record of any calls being made from your car to your phone, anything like that. They haven't done that, of course, but that's one of the fraudulent violations. The other one is they said that they're making him pay $800 a month right now in his restitution. They're saying that 2 of those payments bounced, but I have receipts they were paid for with a Visa. Visa payments don't bounce. That's a ACH checking account thing. So, and those receipts are on my website too. So he did pay that. So that's also fraudulent. And then the other one was they said he failed a marijuana screen, which his doctor has actually prescribed him Marinol, which would cause a positive result for that. So these are the reasons that they executed a military-style raid on my home and my husband.
Yeah, that's unacceptable. Completely
Yeah.
unacceptable and
Like, even if you
un-American.
think he's guilty of all these things, like, that's still no reason to do what they did.
Right. So let's try to sum this up a little bit. Ask it a different way, Adrienne. Why do you think they're doing this? What do you think this is really about?
Well, I think it started with the complaint I made. I think that was kind of what initially kicked it off. You know, how they executed the first raid, the fraudulent absconder. They said that or that my husband opened lines of credit, which he wasn't supposed to do. But we found out after that, like, my husband and my identity had both been stolen, and we both had like some stuff on our credit report that we didn't, wasn't from us. We filed a police report and all that. So that's actually them trying to punish him for being a victim of a crime. So after that, the retaliatory raid in May, and that's what started that. But then shortly before he got arrested in September, I started kind of sunlighting the first video and also just telling the story of what happened, because I knew, like, after they had confiscated that phone and seized it, that they were probably going to try to arrest him again. So I just start sunlighting the whole situation. This is what happened. This is retaliatory. This is the first video. This is the complaint letter I made, and I start detailing everything on rockenhaus.com. Right after that starts happening is when they initiate the second raid. So I think the second raid was actually retaliation for me trying to sunlight the first raid.
What happens next?
Well, okay, so that kind of brings us to his. We didn't think that Lincoln was going to withdraw, but like I said, he did that on Thursday. And the other thing that just happened is that the U.S. attorney, the prosecutor on my husband's criminal case, just got replaced on Friday with a new U.S. attorney. His name is John Neal, and his title is the anti-corruption attorney. Like, he, I guess, investigates corruption within the federal government, which is weird. But I feel like that's almost like a screaming confession that they know that there's corruption here. So his sentencing for all of this was supposed to be on October 7th. He was going to get sentenced without a lawyer. And I've been making so much noise about this that I think the lawyer finally withdrew, and then they assigned this new prosecuting attorney. And now they have changed the 7th from a sentencing, which is Tuesday, to just kind of determine the status of his new attorney. So the sentencing got thrown off the table, and now he's finally going to have a new attorney who I hope can just file a motion to dismiss based on, just what happened.
Maybe not the time for reflection, but I'm sure you've had a few thoughts about this for audience listening and saying to themselves, wow, it's crazy how quickly in America things can become authoritarian and people just busting down your door. What things have you learned that you encourage people, like, hey, you should do this now, or you should protect yourself in these particular ways? Any thoughts on that?
I would say document everything. I mean, the thing I tend to document everything just as, like, kind of, neurotic thing that I do anyway. So I think that was helpful. But, just keep everything documented so that, you can lay out all the facts. Because there's, like we were talking about before, there's so much information here that it does get all twisted. And if you can have kind of like a timeline or just like everything there in like a storage locker available if you need to send it to an attorney or whatever, just keep everything in order, like all your dates, all the phone calls, all the emails, just keep all that, ready. But yeah, the cameras are also a big one.
So, Adrian, let's just, as we wind down here, go back to one thing you mentioned. You received an email from an FBI agent, somebody claiming to be an FBI agent, who was on the Tor mailing list. Can you explain the significance of that?
Yes, through his email, it was kind of like a masterpiece of plausible deniability, but he said he could neither confirm nor deny anything, but he hinted that the investigation, initially with my husband's Tor exit nodes, may have revolved around a darknet market called archetype archetype. It's weird spelling, but then he spent half the email lecturing me on the various federal statutes, the Stored Communication Act, the All Writs Act, that obligate Tor operators to comply with warrants and decryption orders, and the felony charges for failing to do so. It was like kind of a clear veiled threat. It was a legal warning and a justification all in one. And he said the FBI values Tor contributors, but they urge them to comply. But the the most telling part came at the very end. After all the threats and legal warnings, he added a postscript that said, "Off the record, I wish you and your husband nothing but the best and a fast resolution. While I can neither confirm nor deny that this was a mistake, it is possible." Oh, there is one thing. Senator Alyssa Slotkin, she's our senator here in Michigan. She actually conducted a formal congressional inquiry into FCI Milan, where my husband is incarcerated, basically about the violence there, the medical problems he's having, how they're not they're not giving him his medicine that he needs, how they're not giving him the medical care that he needs. Last week they actually finally replied to me saying that they were opening a formal inquiry into the BOP for that. So, it's basically, this isn't just our fight. This is a system that has kind of been weaponized to punish people for standing up for privacy. Kind of arming the senators, other government bodies to kind of look into this is another maybe key thing that you could do to kind of besides the documentation, videos, stuff like that, is just like find out who your allies are and get, help them help you.
All right. So we wish Adrian, we wish you the best. And if you have a platform, please, certainly, at least please follow Adrian and start looking into her stuff and sharing some of it. Get her onto other shows. Let's get some media attention for this. Obviously, it affects much more than her, and even if it just affected her and her husband, we'd still want this to get solved and have a good ending. We will have all the links. People can track this down. Feel free to share this episode. Follow Adrienne. If you have the legal qualifications that she mentioned earlier, definitely reach out to her. She could certainly use that help at this point in time. And otherwise, Adrienne, any final thoughts here?
I think that's it. Yeah, all my contact information is on the website rockenhaus.com. So yeah, the videos, everything is there. So yes, please feel free to check that out. And yeah, I thank you for having me on. It's always good to get the word out as much as I can. So I really appreciate it.